armoring and protection and cynicism is kind of it's not really the comfort zone, but it's at the edge of the comfort zone. These are things that come up, and you remind him, no, we're gonna kind of be vulnerable here, and we're gonna move into this uncomfortable place. All right, so Big Mind is a voice dialogue process. It actually is a beautiful combination of working with the voice dialogue, which is a kind of therapeutic process where we learn how to come in touch with, give voice to aspects of ourselves that normally do not have a voice. So in other words, the disowned aspect of the self. Why are these aspects of myself disowned? Something in my past, some experience, some situation that at that time was too overwhelming to handle. Every single person has this beautiful psychological coping mechanism to disown it, to push it out of our sense of self. It's a survival mechanism, coping mechanism that in that moment, it actually helps us get through a situation. You think of a car accident or some heavy trauma, or even just being shamed in school or something like that. Whatever we if it's just too overwhelming for the self, it's like we push it out. It's like, thank God that that's over, and we cope in that moment. When I was 13 or whenever it was, and yet that coping mechanism tends to become habitual, and then 20, 30, 40 years later, it's still there, disowned. So what was originally a very helpful coping mechanism has now become a disowned or unintegrated aspect of the self. And everybody has this. It's called shadow. Everybody has that more or less. Now, voice dialogue works with that. Big Mind also works with that, but then it moves from these kind of dualistic, separate senses of self, these different aspects of the self, and it moves into these kind of transcendent voices, or these non-dual aspects of the self. So it's very common for meditators to make one of two mistakes. One is that we learn how to transcend. No, actually, I'll say the first one is that we take on a practice, we work hard, we struggle, and yet for years and years and years, we never get to taste the fruit of the meditation practice. It's just something about it, the self boundaries, that kind of self boundary, we can never really kind of access something greater. That's and it's not really a mistake, but that's one situation. The other situation, which is kind of a mistake, is that we learn how to transcend. We learn how to get out of the sense of self, and yet coming back is seen as something that's rather dirty, rather mundane, rather profane, that we just prefer to hang out in these beautiful, wonderful states of emptiness or oneness or love. There's a little bit of a spiritual bypass. Big Mind actually works with both of those. We work through the disowned aspects of the self. We integrate them, we give them voice, we learn from them, and then we're going to move into more transcendent voices. And we're going to do that today, as I said before, with the kind of the hero's journey. So let's get started. Okay, so as a group, we're going to speak to the first part. The first voice is actually the first phase of our discovery cycle, which is answering the call to adventure. So the call to adventure is that when you hear a whisper in the wind, there's some greater potential that you do not have not actualized and realized right now, but there's something that you see in somebody else or you hear in somebody else, and you're very inspired by it, and you're motivated. That part of you that answers that call. Can anybody relate to that? The part of you that brought you here today. Okay, the voice that answers the call to your potential. We'll just say answers the call. Please allow me as a group, and even though the mics are closed, let's everybody answer. As a group, who am I speaking to?
The one who answers the call.
The one who answers the call. Very good. Okay, now individually, you can raise your hands electronically. You can just open your mic and speak, but we're going to take turns. As the voice that answers the call, what's your job? What's your function? Yeah, just kind of feel into that voice. What's your
Calm.
function? Maybe raise your hand physically or electronically, and I'll call the names. Yeah, Jane.
To listen, to answer the call that Jane hasn't realized or actualized, for greater meaning and purpose in her life.
Great, great. So there's greater meaning and there's greater way of being in life, and you're the one that answers that call. What's your job as answering the call? Anybody else?
To learn.
To learn. Great. Okay, you're there to learn. What else? The voice that answers the call, that one that went on the trip. Yes, Amy, the one that went away for the weekend seminar, the one that joined the course. Amy.
I am the voice of answering the call of spontaneity and curiosity.
Great. Okay. Yeah. So in Amy's case, it's always spontaneous and curious. Randy. Hey, Randy, how's it going?
Good, Mose. As the one who answers the call, I am here to inspire Randy to actually open his ears and move forward.
That's great. Yeah. Because without the inspiration, he can just, the inertia will take over and you kind of get him inspired to move out of that. Okay. So everybody get a hang of it. Yeah. The one that answers the call. What's your job? Anybody else?
My job is to make Harriet connect in with immediacy.
Beautiful. So immediately, like carpe diem, seize the day, connect with that. Fantastic. Eloy. Hi, Eloy. Welcome.
Hi, my job is to get Eloy to step out of his comfort zone.
There you go. Great. Yeah. So it's nice and comfortable in there. But the potential, that thing that inspires us is actually on the outside of that comfort zone. So you encourage Eloy by hook or by crook to step out. Okay. It's very, very clear. As the voice that answers the call, how do you benefit the self? How do you benefit the self? Yeah, Mike.
By seeing what is and not what I think it is.
By seeing what is and not what Mike thinks it is.
See what Mike thinks it is.
Yeah, so there's a certain clarity to you, and you're not deluded. You know, Mike or the self can always kind of, in the comfort zone, it's very easy to kind of not really see things as they are, but you see it very clearly. Okay, how do you benefit the self as the voice that answers the call? The one that went on that Vipassana retreat, or the one that joined that weekend, or the one that said yes. Brad, yes. Brad,
I get a sense of enthusiasm.
Okay, great. Yeah, so in enthusiasm, inspiration. Matthias.
Along the same line, I benefit the self by making Matthias' self to see that there is more. There's more to everything.
There's
And
more to everything. Yep.
get him going towards
Fantastic. What would happen to the self if, Matthias, what would happen to the self if you disappeared, if you stopped doing your job?
that. Matthias, he would just go on doing his same old, and slowly sort of just become ordinary, or just to be still. And I would probably die, I think.
Okay, great.
In the same place where he was born, and the same place where knowing
That's
the
great.
same books that someone had gave him before. But without me, he would slowly whimper away.
Fantastic. Randy, what would happen to Randy if you stopped doing your job?
If I stopped doing my job, Randy would never get on the boat and leave the port. He would just stay in the port.
Right. Yeah. Renata?
I guess when I would not do my job, Renate would simply, she would know that she can't get what she wants from the world, and she wouldn't see any alternative. I think it would be horrible for her.
Yeah, it sounds very depressing to see that, oh, there's nothing in the world, or what I want in the world, I actually can't get it. So you tell her that, no, you can do it.
Yes.
Yeah, whether the self can do it or
Exactly.
not, that's a whole nother conversation. It's a whole nother conversation.
But
But you,
yeah, there's
for you,
something to go for. That's what I tell her.
beautiful. There is something to go for. Fantastic. Can everybody relate to this?
Mhm.
Yeah, It's all part of us. Yeah. And from time to time, whenever we do these open calls or whenever I start a course, I always, the very first practice is setting intentions, excuse me, the setting of an intention. And that's this, we're connecting with this part of the self, because this part of the self has a lot of energy, a lot of power, and it actually kind of, there's a lot of faith here at the beginning as well. Great. So let's move to the next phase of our spiritual, the next phase in the hero's journey is called the spiritual, getting your spiritual weapons. Now, weapons, if this word is too aggressive for you, then, you know, it's, again, it's totally metaphorical, but it basically means the practices that you take on, the methodologies, and including the attitudes and mindsets that actually help to launch us on the practice. So let me speak to the voice of practice mind, practice mind. So as a group, who am I speaking to?
Practice mind.
Great, the voice of practice mind. As practice mind, what's your job?
To practice.
Practice, so simple. Yeah, this is not rocket science here. Anybody else as practice mind, what's your job? And I'm not saying practice mind is the only thing, but we're connecting with it here at the beginning. Yes, Mike.
Putting the effort into it. Having Mike put the effort into it.
Yeah, having Mike put the, because of that inertia, because of the comfort zone, it's not, you know, to get out of the comfort zone, it takes a little bit of effort. For a rocket, excuse me, a rocket to leave the Earth, 80% of the fuel is in that first 20% of the journey where the gravity is the strongest. So it takes some effort to break the gravitational force. So that's you. Yeah. What else is your job as the practice mind? Oh, I got it. There's a lot of great stuff written here. I'm sorry, I'm not reading these. Let me just readjust mine. Develop discipline and continue to build a foundation for Eloy. Beautiful. To enjoy the disciplined commitment, to keep going, to keep practicing, to keep Adi on track. Because if you didn't keep on track, Adi, if you didn't keep Adi on track, what would happen to Adi?
Would just meander, do something else.
Okay, cool.
And
Meandering.
probably also, like you said, with the rocket launcher, you would just not launch.
Yeah, not launch, right? Yeah, sit on the launch pad for forever. And it's funny too, because you know the self can even build a beautiful rocket. We buy all the sports equipment or the workout equipment or a nice meditation cushion, or we pay for a course. And yet, if we're not careful, the self can still sit on the rocket on the launching pad without ever really taking off. Renata.
I am the bridge for Renate between her dream and her reality, where she can put her feet
Oh,
on.
that's awesome. That's awesome. Ah, great. So it's a place, you're the tangible for her to put her feet on and start to walk that path. Beautiful. Steve says to take the extra step beyond what was in the past, to guide Gerlinda into silence and loving kindness. Oh, that's nice. To give up, get distracted. I'm not sure what the answer to that one is. Practice and dare to be seen, to enjoy the discipline. Wonderful, wonderful. Hans Peter, yes. Sorry, not Hans Peter. Piero,
As practice mind, I don't try, I do.
Wonderful. Great, great. So you're Yoda. There is no try. Do or do not. There is no try. Fantastic. Okay, so with all of this effort that we have, now we know, I won't even ask the question, if you didn't do your job, what would happen to the self? Because it sounds like the self is just going to stay in the comfort zone. So with your practice, you take on maybe some tried and true methods, some, 2,000-year-old Christian prayer, or some 2,500-year-old Buddhist meditation, or some really solid therapeutic methodologies, even new age practices, something that actually activates the path of practice, and it accesses the inner path. Allow me to speak to the voice of crossing the threshold from the normal kind of comfort zone sense of self into the learning zone. Let me speak to the voice of crossing the threshold. And as a group, who am I speaking to?
Crossing the threshold.
Beautiful. And as crossing the threshold, yeah, on this side of the threshold is the comfort zone. On this side of the threshold is it's probably unpleasant a little bit. I got to move out of my comfort. It could be uncomfortable, but it's where the learning happens. As the voice of crossing the threshold, what's your job? What's your job?
To say to Harriet that it's not too risky.
Great. Because if you don't say that, Harriet's going to think it's too big of a risk. Yeah, right. Go back into the comfort zone. We have it's wintertime now in the northern hemisphere. So it's nice and warm. It's gezellig if we have any Dutch friends here. It's gemütlich for our German friends. It's it's cozy in there. It's a big risk to step out. So you're there to remind Harriet that it's going to be risky, but it's going to be okay. Matthias says his job is to give courage and dare to go into the unknown, to have courage, to help Randy to stop making excuses, procrastinate, to have courage, to show Julie that there are paths and possibilities. Beautiful. Can everybody connect with this? I mean, I read these things and I could have said it myself. My job is to help Steve understand the value of pain and discomfort, courage, fortitude, persistence. Morris, and then Susanna.
Yes, my job is to stay being vulnerable.
Okay, so you keep Morris vulnerable.
Yes.
Yeah, all that armoring and protection and cynicism and defensiveness is kind of it's not really the comfort zone, but it's at the edge of the comfort zone. These are things that come up, and you remind him, no, we're gonna kind of be vulnerable here, and we're gonna move into this uncomfortable place, temporarily uncomfortable place. Beautiful. I thought, Susanna, did you have your hand up?
Somehow I managed Susanna to feel a bit uncomfortable in the too comfortable.
Can you say
So
that again?
I'm a sort of sting and a sort of desire for uncomfort and for heading for some difficulties in
There
order
you
to
go.
grow. It's a strange
great.
thing. I don't know how I'm doing it, but somehow I make her want to go out.
Well, that's interesting. So you encourage her to go out and to somehow embrace the difficulties.
Yes.
Yeah. How does she feel? How does she feel about that? It's the same thing to everybody. How does the self feel about all those difficulties of? And I don't mean making things more difficult than they need to be. I mean, just when a baby's born, there's some growing pains there. So, how does Susanna feel about the growing pains that she has to go through?
I'm too lazy and I would want to avoid them.
Who am I speaking to?
As Susanna.
Oh, okay, Susanna. So I want to speak to the voice of crossing the threshold.
As the voice of crossing the threshold, I'm heading for something
right. Yeah.
adventurous.
Fantastic. So if you had a compass, it points to that.
Yeah, it points to going to the training with the more difficult teacher in order to learn more.
Great. Fantastic. Gerlinda says leading Gerlinda through the gap to a purer experience. Bob says to enjoy the ride regardless of the difficulty. Eloy says to help Eloy feel the energy available in crossing the gap. Heinz says inspire Heinz to enjoy the discomfort. Yeah. Because, also, from a Buddhist point of view, discomfort is one word that we hear again and again in Buddhist practice. The word is dukkha. Oh my God, dukkha, dukkha, dukkha. Dukkha sucks. That's the official translation. Dukkha sucks. And the basic relationship to dukkha is this. We just kind of, and there has to be something that's going to encourage the self to kind of, again, we don't need to make things more difficult than they are, but to somehow turn and face it, to be with it again, with that right relationship of mindfulness. Let's move to the next voice. So when we move out of the comfort zone, when we cross the threshold, we will be faced with challenges, trials, and tribulations. Allow me to speak to the voice of the part of you that faces challenges, the voice of facing challenges. Take a deep breath. And as a group, who am I speaking to?
Facing challenges.
Yeah, the voice of facing challenges. Okay, so what's your job?
To face challenge.
To face challenge, yeah. Again, this is not rocket science, to face challenges. Anybody else? What's your job? Aline.
To avoid Aline to flight.
Invite her to fly. Beautiful. Great. Renata.
To make life worth living, to enjoy
Nice.
action.
Nice, nice. Hero says, I show that there is an unknown. Bob says to embrace the observer role. Beautiful. Brad says, could give Brad courage. Julie says to show Julie that growing pains are normal. Oh my God. As much as we don't want to accept that, it's true. Greet says that her job as facing challenges is to get Greet to jump. Heinz, to stay in the discomfort and not run away. Or if it just happens to be too uncomfortable, we can run away. But then, you know, we reorganize ourselves, we regather ourselves. There's no failure in the spiritual path. There's just the conditions. Sometimes the conditions are not there to stay with it. But with practice, with maturity, as the practice develops, as we develop that inner capacity to stay with things and the inner competency to skillfully work with them, like Heinz says, that we're able to stay with, have faith and persistence, stay with the discomfort, have faith and persistence, patience and compassion, to find my place. Jane says fearlessness. Linda, to endure. Yeah, because dukkha, this kind of challenges, they come, they stay for a while, they torture us tremendously, more or less, sometimes more, sometimes less, but it is like torture. And if we have patience and persistence, and if we can endure that, we will move through it. Can everybody relate to this voice? Quick question, different question. You're the voice that faces challenges. How does the self, honestly, how does the self feel about you? How does the self feel about Brad?
Ambivalent.
Ambivalent, right? Yeah. Great. The self would rather, would rather not face things. Renata.
The self feels like I only want to follow when I know how long the tunnel is.
Sure. The self wants guarantees.
So it wants guarantees, it wants clarity, look into the future, but I can't even, so.
Right.
Yeah, ambivalent.
Yeah. Great. Susanna, and then we'll go to Amy.
Well, I think that Susanna has this ambivalent attitude too, because on the one side, she would wish never to have undergone all those trials and difficulties and not seeing anything, phases, or to eliminate them at all. But on the other hand, she knows exactly that there would be no real light in life without me making her persist and endure and go for the goal, go for the treasure, so that she can really taste the taste of life.
That's great. Beautiful. Amy, did you want to? I saw your hand, but it disappeared.
Yeah, that happens on my computer. Yes, because as a voice of facing challenges, Amy knows that she's strong and she does face them, but when she hears that there's going to be a challenge, she wants to run away.
Yeah, totally. It's so natural. It's like reflexive. Yeah.
Yes, she wants to run away, but then she does come back. But in the initial, from the conditioning, she shrinks in, but then she can handle it.
Well, let me ask you this. Does she come back or do you encourage her to come back?
I encourage her to come back, and
Yeah,
she's
yeah.
open to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's all the self. Yeah, we're just kind of a little
Right.
bit taking it apart. We're gonna bring it all back together in an integrated form soon. Let's go to Mandy and then Piero.
As the voice of facing challenges, I feel Mandy wants to be more like me.
Awesome.
Wants to be me.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. So she's inspired by you. She secretly wants to be you. That's fantastic. Great. Piero.
The self likes to get a kick from time to time.
And you help him get that kick.
Yeah.
Yeah, you go bungee jumping. Maybe not real bungee jumping, but you jump into the challenge.
The voice of facing challenges gives me a kick from time to time.
Who am I speaking to?
So the self likes this kick from time to time.
Great. Yeah. So Piero likes you from time to time.
The self likes.
Yeah, Piero likes you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. I like what Jane wrote here. She said that the self resists and feels threatened. Does anybody else relate to that? That, we're the ones that face challenges. Let's face it, but the self is like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. Yeah, sure. And there can even be an inner struggle. Not for everybody. Yeah. Again, there's no wrong answers with this. For some, it could be this way. Others, it would be that way. Julia says, Julie finds you valuable. Matthias says that the self tells him, as the voice of facing challenges, to leave me alone. Elizabeth says the self is afraid and courageous at the same time. Steve says the self does not want to be first. It wants to see others try by challenging first. The self is persistent in offering paths, easier paths, I'm sure. And Bob says the self wants to be entertained. Fantastic. Renata?
Sometimes the self keeps not trusting me and at the same time envies me.
Great. So the self doesn't trust you, but at the same time, she or he, it envies you. Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, let's take a deep breath because, we've gone through from answering the call to getting our practices, methodologies, our spiritual weapons, to crossing the threshold. We did skip meeting allies and guides, but that's okay for today. We're at the challenges, trials, and tribulations. We are not in Kansas anymore, Dorothy. We have left the comfort zone. We are out there in the unknown. We are in the wilderness. Oh my God. Because that leads to its inevitable conclusion of the dark night of the soul. But the dark night of the soul as a spiritual insight, there's a wisdom to you. Does everybody relate to that? It's like things are happening. It's like, oh my God, I would give anything for this to not happen. And then weeks go by, months go by, years go by, and you look back and you said, wow, I grew up a lot because of that. So there's a wisdom to the dark night of the soul. That's what I want to speak to. So everybody take a deep breath and allow me to speak to the voice of the dark night of the soul. And as a group, who am I speaking to?
Dark night of the soul.
What's your job?
Teach. To
teach.
Open Jane up. To open Jane up.
Yeah.
Show her.
It makes total. Yeah, please. To show her, you were going to say? Renata, what's your job as the dark night of the soul?
I'm the tunnel which goes underneath the sea to bring people through without drowning to the other shore, I guess. I'm the only way.
Who am I speaking to? You guess you're the only way. Yeah, fantastic. Brad says to reveal the truth. Adi says to let Adi's old identity loosen her grip so she can grow to release herself in a new way. My job as Dark Knight of the Soul is to stir shit up for Eloy. How does Eloy feel about you as the Dark Knight of the Soul?
Angry.
So the self feels angry about you. Yeah. You know, you could even say that the self goes through the 5 phases of being pissed off at you. Anger, or what is it first? Denial about you, angry about you, negotiation with you, depression because, you know, oh my God, here you are. And then acceptance. But I want to speak to you, not the self. What's your value as the Dark Knight of the Soul? How do you value the self? I shouldn't say how do you value the self, excuse me. What value do you offer the self?
Experiencing the unknown.
Lynn says to help her find the way, to pull Heinz on the ground, to slow him, show him his own depths. Dark corners bring light to them. Yeah, right, exactly. You're the one that goes into the darkness. As the Dark Knight of the Soul, I open Piero's eyes. My job is to convince Steve that life is about suffering. Help to find the way in life, to terrify, to make me question, to cut through superficiality. Tired but stronger. Let's see, Anna. What's your job as the Dark Knight of the Soul?
I have taken away the surplus of luggage from Anna, and my value is that she feels so relieved to travel light.
So so Anna's carrying baggage. I guess we're all carrying some baggage and luggage. And you're there, you're like, hey, there's no baggage here. And the result of that is that she feels lightness and relief. And is that your mic is closed if you're?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm here, but my camera today is not working as it should. So you don't see me, but I hope you feel me.
I feel you. Yoshika, what value do you bring to the self?
Empathy. I teach empathy.
Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. Randy.
As the Dark Knight of the Soul, I have torn down the walls and revealed the dark to Randy, and am there to help him not be as afraid of that darkness that he built.
Wow. Wow. So you're there to actually show him that sure, it's very dark, but there's no need to fear it.
No. Turning the light on. I'm turning the light on, you know, just like the Motel 6. We'll leave the light on for you. Right. We'll reveal what you have, and then to be there as the hug that you might need, because you're afraid of it, because Randy's afraid of it. He's not wanting to reveal that part of himself. He's been burying it for so long that it's become even scarier than it really is.
Yeah. And then you said that he even built it.
Randy built it. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's incredible. What would the self be like if you were part of their life? What would happen to the self if if we just think of kind of the grieving cycle, it goes from, something happens, heaven forbid, but it happens in life. That's kind of a bit shaking or a lot shaking. And, we have denial, Then we go into anger. Then we go into negotiation. Then we go into depression, and then we come out of it with equanimity or acceptance. It's a process of maturation. And the depression part of that is really you, the dark night of the soul. What would happen to the self if you weren't part of their life? Amy.
Basically, there would be no seed, there'd be no growth.
Great.
Because my job is to show her how she's blossomed and grown. And without me, she would be in that darkness. She would be in that. There's seed underneath and the dirt. No growth.
Jane says that she would remain asleep. Vladdy says to teach the hope in spite of the darkness. Julie would be in peace. Yeah, there would be a certain amount of peace there, that's for sure. I create greater depth to Eloy. Renata?
Without me, if I would be needed for the journey, Renate wouldn't really value the journey and the goal and the end of it. And if I would be needed but wouldn't be there, Renate would think she wouldn't value herself and wouldn't believe in herself.
Great.
I'm a great teacher of potential and of strength.
Yoshika.
Life would be superficial and very kind of scattered.
Yeah, it'd be safe, but it'd be superficial and kind of scattered. Susanna.
Without me, Susanna would only be looking from outside at things, what they seem, but she wouldn't experience what she feels that things are. She wouldn't know her own experience, blinded by the light, sort of. So without me, she would be lost in illusions about herself and the world.
Wow. So you're a big wake-up call for her to really see reality as it is. Just like a butterfly, a caterpillar goes into it eats, it eats a lot, overeats in a way. Its cells start to break up, creates a cocoon, goes through a metamorphosis. It can't be fun for the caterpillar. It can't be pleasant. The cells are actually breaking up. Yeah. And the cells that are inside that are asleep are waking up and transforming into a butterfly. And then, there's that birth of the butterfly, but that's got to be the dark night. And there's the emergence or this transformation. Everybody take a deep breath and allow me to speak to the voice of transformation. And who am I speaking to?
Transform.
As the voice of the transformed transformation, what's your job?
To show the way.
To show the way. Show the way to who?
Whatever's next.
Do you show that way to Harriet or to other people?
Oh, to Harriet.
Okay, beautiful. Yeah. Heinz says to find new pathways. Brad said to bring Brad into wholeness. Nice. Moore says to upgrade the self into like a higher operating system. Integrate new learnings. Matthias, Eileen says to lead Eileen in a higher level of spirituality and humanity. Deborah says to find the unconditioned response. Beautiful. As the voice of transformation, how do you benefit the self? Experience new perspectives. Not to get stuck. There's a new perception. clear understanding, free and clear mind, heart, and soul. As I said before, this kind of transformation, this can be micro, like, a little issue that I worked on. I had a coach or a therapist, and I worked on that issue, and wow, we went through it, and I'm done with that issue. I've really integrated it and cleaned it up, and free. Or it could be macro. This could be big life experiences that really change us, and we never go back to being who we were. But at some point, we must return to the marketplace and bestow our gifts upon the world. So as the transformed self, what gifts do you offer to the world? Randy, do you want to give since your hand is up, you can say whatever you want to say, and then if you want to answer that as well.
Sorry, I feel like that as transformation, what I give Randy is symbolically is like that sustaining note that just is eternal and that just keeps going. Beautiful. So the potential is always there for everything, but that there's a freedom of that. To me, that sound of just that last note that just sustains.
And it's now, and it's now, and it's
now, and it's present.
And it's present forever and always, already.
Yeah.
Now and present. Beautiful. Jean says compassion and clarity. Nadie says more clarity, more connection to truth. Piero says transformation provides a new consciousness. Leora says self-confidence. Yeah, there's a certain self-confidence about you. Nowhere to go, nothing to do, no agenda, nothing to prove, and yet you're fully here. Renata.
I can offer a better perspective for other people, a new perspective of freedom.
Beautiful. Is everybody feeling the lightness of this voice? We kind of went through this kind of very dualistic kind of different voices that took us through a certain thing. And now post dark night transformation, again, this could be micro or macro, it doesn't really matter. We're just trying this perspective on, we're getting that taste. Let's make a shift. And I'm going to speak to the voice of big mind. Whatever that means from you, from here, everybody take a deep breath and shift into the voice of big mind. And as a group, who am I speaking to? If you feel like you want to say something, go ahead and open your mic now. And I'm going to ask, if there's background noise, maybe not, but if you can open your mic, and then I'm going to ask some questions, and you can just randomly speak or write them down. As the voice of big mind, how big are you?
Infinite.
Limitless. Everywhere.
Everywhere.
I don't know.
Universal.
Yeah. Universal. There's no, yeah. The self is born 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, maybe more.
Vast.
Yeah, vast, yeah. And the self will die in another 20, 30, 40, 50 years, 60 years, who knows? But were you ever born as big mind? When were you born?
It's always
9
been
years away.
Always been here.
You've always been here. And when will you die?
We'll never die.
So do you have a beginning as big mind? And do you have an end?
I'll be born and die now.
Beautiful, beautiful. Let's sit quietly as big mind. Big mind is a full-on, non-dual state. It has no opposites. As big mind, I have no opposite. There is no opposite. And yet, paradoxically, there's another side of this coin, and that's the voice of big heart. So everybody take a deep breath. Allow me to speak to the voice of big heart. And as a group, who am I speaking to?
Big heart.
And again, if you want to open your mic and just kind of say, how do you function?
Love.
Pure love.
Pure love.
It's the frequency of aloha.
How do you feel about the self? This big heart, how do you feel about the self?
Love the self.
Tender.
She's so welcome to see me.
Yeah.
Compassion for the self.
Yeah, that's what Eileen wrote as well.
Kind
Steve,
and loving.
kind and loving, beautiful. Yeah, Steve says, I no longer judge. That's big heart.
Bright as the sun.
All right, so I am, even in big mind and big heart, sense of time tends to drop away, sense of space drops away. It's rather effortless, and the sense of the self is there, but not dominant. And yet we do have a time. This session is on a clock, so, and we've come up to that time. So we're probably going to go about 3 minutes over, just to give everybody a little heads up. I'll read a few of these. Steve, as I said before, he says, I no longer judge his big heart. Deborah says, big heart. As big heart, I am acceptance and curiosity. Bob says, see me, feel me, touch me, heal me. Beautiful. Daniel says, glad. Yeah. So we need to bring one voice back, one final voice, and I'd like to speak to the voice of the freely functioning and fully integrated human being, so that all of these voices through the whole hero's journey, through transformation, through the dark night, through transformation, into big mind, into big heart, that all these voices are they're integrated. We can access them and we can function at each one of those transformational points in any type of journey. So I'd like to speak to the integrated self, and they have a name, and your name is written there on the screen. So as a group, who am I speaking to?
The integrated self.
What's your name?
Renate.
We come back to the name. Great, everybody.
Integrated Eli.
Integrated Eli, yeah. So thank you all for this this practice session on a big mind in the process of transformation. Whether we've been through big transformations ourselves or smaller transformations, or we're right in the middle of it, or we get up to that dark night, we pull away every time. It's okay. That's the process. I hope that this practice of Big Mind helped us to understand these kind of necessary steps that we take in that journey, and often the necessary steps we avoid as well in the journey. Yeah, I guess I have a few announcements. If anybody is interested in doing more of this practice, like I said before, I have my my regular meditation membership program called the Meditation Discovery Cycle. I'll send something about that tomorrow. But also in January, I'm going to be opening up a new course called Meditation for the Spiritual Warrior, which is basically an 8-week course that's going to move through these non-dual voices. With lots of cool practices and great friends to practice with. So you'll get some information about that as well. Until then, thank you for joining. And I do these open calls once every month or every 2 months. So definitely, please feel free to join again. And I want to wish everybody a great day, evening, or night, wherever you might be. Happy Hanukkah for those who lit the first candle or lighting the first candle tonight.
Oh, that's right.
And yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mom.
Thank you, Mom.
Thanks, everyone. Hope you feel better.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Get well, Mom.
Thank you.
Well.
Thank you, everybody. Wishing you all the best.
Thank you, Miles.